I'd like to bring up a couple of thoughts about Grace's family and my first impressions. When I first met her, I thought it was a wonderful family, very well organized, and were always doing things. They had a summer home, they would go to Florida, they had a boat, they had they had a wonderful Sunday dinner that I enjoyed so much. And I would go to church with Grace simply to be able to go home with them and have the Sunday dinner that Preston would make these wonderful rolls with. But I liked talking to her father, and he would share with me a lot of stories about the business and what was going on. And in Chicago, in his time of life, now Dad was born in 1894, and Dad Getcho. And his father, George, incorporated Phillips Getcho Corporation in 1894 here in Chicago. But if you just go back a bit, you know, we had the Civil War in the 1860s, and then Chicago had the Chicago Fire in the 1870s, in which all of Chicago was just literally burned out. And these people, these Germans, the Getcho family, were up in Appleton, and they were starting mechanical engineering companies, in the sense that you see a brick building or a stucco building, all the innards, the pipes, the electrical, or whatever was inside the heating, that's what they did. And as Chicago needed to be rebuilt, they started bidding on jobs from the leftover from the Chicago Fire in the 1880s. And as they were getting capital to rebuild, and starting also, they were learning about skyscrapers for the first time, building multiple story buildings of more than 3 or 4 stories. They were building 8, 9, and 10-story buildings, are beginning to. And you had the architectural firm of Sullivan and Root and others like that that were well known and often studied. You had Frank Lloyd Wright. You had a big prairie group of architects that were ready and able to build. You had Chicago that wanted to rebuild. And so the Getchos, George namely, they had a business in Appleton with his brother, W.S. Patterson and Company. He decided to form his own and came to Chicago and started Phillips Getcho Corporation with a fellow by the name of Phillips. They soon decided to go separate ways, and they left the name the same because of all the bonding that they had set up. You had to have insurance policies in order to submit bids. So with the building of Chicago and being rebuilt, you had the Merchandise Mart that was built in 1929. They did all the mechanical engineering on it. You had the Palmer House. You had the hotels that were going up and down Michigan Avenue. Phillips Getcho Company was probably a part of 1 out of every 5 buildings that was up and down the area. And there are several competitive firms that were in the same business, and they soon realized that they cooperated a little bit together, which of course is no longer legal to do that. They could spread the work out, and so up came the Pope Construction Company, which was the same as did the same work that Phillips Getcho did, and several other companies. And the Pope family they were close, and they also got together and started Sloan Valve Corporation. And Sloan Valve started in 1912 with the Popes and the Getchos putting up $50,000 each, and started Sloan Valve Corporation with Mr. Sloan, who had a valve that would work in salt water. And at this particular time, the valve was extremely important for shipping. Now, this is 1912. Shipping is starting to really go, and we had World War I that needed all these Liberty ships to be built, and they were all using Sloan valves and they were building Liberty ships for World War I to send supplies to England. when their war started in 1913. So we had such interesting eras. We had Chicago Fire, you had World War I, you had electricity just coming into existence around the turn of the century. You know, many homes were not electrified until, I think the first ones were around 1898, even though Thomas Edison was in New York and New Jersey. His partner, Sam Ensel, was from Chicago and went to Chicago and started Commonwealth Edison Company. Well, that fit right in with Phillips Getchell Corporation, who was doing the mechanical engineering and the piping and all the conduit for electricity. So it was all kind of starting together, along with the shipping, the war, the electricity. It was just a booming time, and they were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And the business just grew and grew and grew. And what was so interesting that he told me, with the two wars, World War II and World War I, were extremely important to the company as far as doing jobs. But Phillips Getchell never had more than 9 or 10 people working for it at one time. In terms of office employees and people doing estimates and certain foremen that they kept. But they could go to the union. And the union of the pipe fitters union could supply 8 to 10 to 20,000 people for jobs. And at several times in the career of Phillips Getchell, they had over 20,000 people working on jobs all around Chicago and parts of the United States.
Wow.
So it was a very big company, but a very small nucleus controlled a very large group of potential workers.
That's interesting.